Let me bring up the Gemara. Okay, so the Gemara yesterday was discussing on the Amoini and the Mayovi if they can come, whether that they could come into an Amoini and Mayovi may not marry a Jewish girl, but an Amoinis and a Mayovis is allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. And the Gemara wanted to know where we know that from. So the Gemara ended up bringing down a fascinating story how when David came out to confront Goliath, Shaul wanted to know who is this fellow. And the Gemara says, what do you mean Shaul wanted to know who this fellow was? He knew David well. And the Gemara thought maybe he wanted to know who his father was. And the Gemara again said, what do you mean? He knew his father. Because Yishai was a very big general. He commanded 600,000 people. The Gemara said he just wanted to know if David came from Peretz, which means he's destined to Malchus, which means he's a threat to Shaul's throne, or if he was from Zerach, which means he comes from prestigious lineage, but nothing to worry about, that he might be a threat to my Malchus. The Gemara asked, how did Bechalal Shaul even think that there was some type of threat? Thank you so much. So the Gemara says, because the body armor that belonged to Shaul, who was a much larger person than David HaMelech, when it was given to David HaMelech, it suddenly shrunk to David HaMelech's size. So Shaul knew this isn't some regular person, this is someone who could possibly be a threat. So then Doeg Hadoimi jumped in and said, why are you concerned about whether or not this person is royal Malchus? I don't even know if he's royal to come into Klal Yisrael, because it says Le'yavi Amoni Mali B'chal Hashem. So on that, Avner says, what are you talking about? It's Amoni V'le Amonis, Le'yavi V'le Me'avis. So Doeg, once again, who was a troublemaker, Doeg said, what are you talking about? Just because it says the word Amoni in male tense, does that mean it's not referring to a female? Mamzer, v'lo mamzeres. So the Gemara said, no, mamzer by definition means mumzor. It's made out of wrong components. Doesn't make a difference if it's male or female. So then Doeg asked, what about mitzri, v'lo mitzris? Are you going to say that? No, you say the mitzris is also as well. So Avner said, well, no. Since the pasuk says the reason why Amoinim and Me'avim are also, and it's because Asher Kidnu Aschem Balachim V'mayim. It's a woman, it's a man's job to bring food out of the city to greet people who are journeying through. Not women. It's not the women's job at all. So now Doeg, with his riches, came with a flipkai. He said, flip, what are you talking about? The men are going to serve women? The men would bring for the men, the women would bring for the women. And since they didn't, even in the minus, even in the Mayobis, isn't allowed to marry the Klal Yisrael. So this David HaMelech, I don't even know if he could be Jewish. He's not even allowed to marry the Kahal, because he is the product of an Amoinis, of a Moyavis, I'm sorry. So they decided, Shaul Melech said, go ask in the Besmedrash. In the Besmedrash, they agreed with what Avner said, that it's Amoni v'lo Amoinis, Moyavi v'lo Moyavis, and in fact, David HaMelech is kosher. He has kosher yichus. He could marry into Klal Yisrael. So after they got this confirmation from Bezdin, then Doeg came to Bezdin and he attacked Bezdin all over. He went directly to Bezdin, he attacked Bezdin. So let's turn now onto Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, and we'll get started with today's Daf. So Zok Gemara actually Doeg Kol Hani Kushyosu. Doeg bombarded the Olam and the Besmedrash, the Bezdin, with all of these kashas. You say mitzvah v'lay mitras. Why would you say amoni v'lay amonis? Why would you say me'avi v'lay me'avis? And is it not a woman's job to bring out food to serve to women? Ishtikul. The Besmedrash didn't have an answer. Because of that, Doeg seemed to have triumphed. In fact, that David HaMelech is also to marry into Klal Yisrael. They actually wanted to call out. They wanted to make an announcement that David, his yichus is possible. Miyad. What happened after that? V'amasa benish, and I'm going to go to the side margin to read this out of the Torah. Or it says, "V'samasa sham or some Avshalom tachas Yoyev." Amasa put Avshalom under Yoyev al Tzav on the army. The Amasa benish, and there was Amasa benish ushmoi Yisra Yisraeli. So there was this gentleman called Amasa. His name was Yisra Yisraeli. Asher ba el Avigal. This is not Avigail, it's Avigal. And if you notice, the Lashon HaPasuk is Gimel Lamed Avigal, but in the Gemara it sticks a Yud in between the Yud and between the Gimel and the Lamed, which is a mistake. It's Avigal, not Avigail. Bas Nachash Achoy Sruya. Nachash Achoy Sruya Em Yoyav. Nachash is referring to Yishai. Why was Yishai referred to as a Nachash? Because Yishai was one of the 4 people who never did an Aveira. And the reason why he died was Bishvil Avain HaNachash, because of the oven of Adam Arishon. But he himself had no Aveira that would have caused him to die. Good morning, Good morning, Benzi. So Gemara. So Zok to Gemara. And it says, it says in the Pasuk, Yeser HaYishmaeli. It calls him Yeser HaYishmaeli. Next Pasuk says, Vavigal Yolda as Amasa, Vavi Amasa, who? Yeser HaYishmaeli. So who is this Yeser HaYishmaeli? Amarava, it's referring to, let's see, it says, Yeser, it's right. It says in the Pasuk before, now it calls the same person Yisra Yishmaeli, but he's a Jew. He's not a Yishmaeli. So Amar Rava said, Melamed shechagar charboy ki Yishmael. It's a raya that this Yeser pulled out his sword. He put on his, so he seized his sword, just like a Yishmaeli, Omar, and he said, "Call me she'enoi shemeya halacha, whoever doesn't accept this halacha of amoini v'lo amoinis, me'avi v'lo me'avis, yidaker b'cherev, should be killed and poked with this sword." Kach mikublani mibeis dina shel Shmuel Haramotzi. I was makabel the following psak from the Beis of Shmuel Haramotzi: amoini v'lo amoinis, me'avi v'lo me'avis. And that settled the issue. So there's a couple of questions over here. Oh, good morning, Akiva. I see Akiva there. I see Chaim Tzvi. Good morning, good morning. Thank you very much.
Remote.
Thank you for setting it up. Is it clear?
Yosy, where's the remote?
The remote is in the box that normally houses the Anchor sound system.
That's what I thought. Okay, save it.
Okay. So let's see the Gemara Vayter. So we have over here very interesting. He was called Yishmaeli because he put a sword. Who do we know is the person who we associate with killing and with swords? Yishmael? It's Esav, right? Yudai Mida Esav. So if we're trying to illustrate a guy who uses a sword and kills people, it should have called him Yeser HaAmaleki. What type is a Yishmaeli? So the Mefarshim tell us, very unbelievable. Who wrote this? This is written by Ezra Sofer. Ezra Sofer was in the days of the death, the killing of the Navi Gedalia ben Achikam, for which we fast on Tzom Gedalia. Does anybody know the name of the person that murdered Gedalia ben Achikam? His name was Yishmael, not the Yishmael that we know as Yitzchak's brother. It was a different Yishmael. So in Ezra's generation, when you wanted to talk about a murderer, you called him Yishmael. In our generation, it could be Paul Bernardo, but they called him a Yishmael. So that's why when Ezra Sofer was illustrating that he took a sword, he used the word Yishmael. And he said, Kol mi she'eni shomea lachazu, yidaker b'cherev. Kach mukabalnu bebeis dina shel Shmuel Haramotzi, Amoni v'le amonis mo'avi v'loy mo'avis. Now the question here is, what new development was there to convince Doeg? What changed? Now suddenly this issue is resolved. He still has all his kashas. So the Ben Yoda and the Brisker Rav addressed this shaila in a beautiful fashion, which also gives us a free Dvar Torah that we can use on Shavuos. And they say as follows: something that's a logical argument, such as it's not the woman's job to bring lechem and mayim, that's something that you can argue on. However, if you have a Kabbalah, not necessarily Allah Mashmusina, but you have a Kabbalah ish ish from your Rebbes, from a Bezdin, that's something that logic will never be able to change, because we were Mekabbalah. That's what changed here. What changed here is we're not coming with a logical argument that can possibly be refuted. We're coming with a Kabbalah. When you look into Megillas Rus and you see when Pliny Almoini refused to go ahead with the Yibum on Rus, what did he say? If you look at Rashi, he says the reason why he didn't want to do it was he was afraid that his Zera, his children, will be impacted, meaning his children won't be accepted into Klal Yisrael because of Amoni ve'amonis Moyavi Moyavis. Correct, Brisker Rav Amori Kakasha. Why wasn't he worried about him himself being over allowed? He wasn't allowed to marry Rus Mayavia. That didn't seem to bother him at all. He was more than willing to do it. He was only worried about his children. Zakti Brisker Rav Gevaltik, because he thought his mistake was that this was a logical conclusion. Because it's not their job to go out for lechem u'v'yayin. But had he realized that this is mukubal ni'bezdinish or shmul or mosi, this is not stam a logical conclusion that someone in the future might argue with, and therefore pass on his kids. This is Kabbalah, and this will never ever change. So why was he not worried about himself? Taka today's Bezdin, Paskin, he could marry her. But what if tomorrow's Bezdin thinks of a different Svar and uses a different Svar to say that in fact that it was Asr? That's why he didn't want to do it. But since it's a Kabbalah from Bezdin, it's a Messiah, that really means there's never a worry at all.
So Boaz never had the argument of Shmuel Aramasi. Boaz was using, what did he use? When he came up with Amoni V'Layamonis, what did he say? He used the logic of like Kidmechem Belechem U'B'Mayim. What was Boaz's heter?
Yeah, maybe he used the Svara. He paskin the Svara. But Lamaitze was a Kabbalah. And since the Kabbalah, it's rock solid. No, Boaz must also have held that it was a Kabbalah. Because if Boaz didn't hold it was a Kabbalah, why wouldn't he have had the same concern with his children? So it must be that Boaz knew it was a Kabbalah, and therefore he knew it's something that could never, ever be backtracked upon. Zog to Gemara. How could you even believe? How could you even believe this person, this Yasser Ishmaeli? How could you believe him to make such a psak halacha? V'yomer of Abba Omer Rav, Kol Talmud Chacham Shemoyer Halacha Uba. Any Talmud Chacham who paskins a halacha, Im Koydem Ma'asamra, if he paskin this before he was in a position where he had to be supporting a position. For instance, if the shaila came up about Amoni V'Layamonis, in the Besmedrash, so they stop shmuz learning academically, and they paskin that way, Im Koydem Ma'asamra, Shaimim Lo, then you'll believe him. But if it's only after David comes under attack and he has an agenda to protect the reputation of David HaMelech, there it's Ein Shaimim. There you can't listen to him. So how can you believe him? So Gemara, Shiny Hacha da Shmuel Veisdinoi Kayim. Shmuel and his Bezdin wasn't something in ancient history; it was still Kayim. So therefore, Rashi very profoundly. Rashi says, "What's the Maila of the fact that the Bezdin of Shmuel was still standing. The fourth line from the top in Rashi. It's a milsa of David Lagluya and he wouldn't be mishaker. Now Chas was shown that there should be a havamina that the Talmud Chacham, the Dayan, is going to corrupt the halacha. It means if someone has an agenda, if someone knows that he has to come up with a certain psak, his logic might not be as pure and as reliable as possible. Not that he would purposely change what he knows is the real psak to suit his agenda. Now, this in and of itself is a whole shaila, because most of the times, as a matter of fact, 100% of the time, Rabbanim don't write a whole handbook of psak and then we follow it. Rabbanim paskin shailas as you ask them. So every shaila that you ask them is already achar ma'aseh. So Tosfos helps us understand this a little better. So Tosfos Amar ben Tam, Danu Davka Hecha Tuhu Atzmo Negei that we said the Mekoyim Ma'aseh Shoymim Loi, but after Ma'aseh Ein Shoymim Loi, that's if it's a personal negias. Avada he could paskin shailas after they happen. That's when they're presented to him. But if he personally is nageya, he has to recuse himself. Because in Yasra, like in our case, Yasra, so Yitzarech Loi Torah, Sharei Bas Yis Shainasa. Yasra also married one of the children of Yishai. So he was also impacted by the Psak Halacha of my Avi V'Lei Me'avis. How do we know that he was married into the Yishai's family? It says, Asher Ba El Bas Avigal Bas Nachash. And who is Nachash? Bas Misha Meis Be'itav Shal Nachash. The person who died only because of the Aveir of the Nachash of Adam Arishon, because he didn't have any Aveirs of his own. Okay, and I'm going to skip down to the bottom. But if his family personally doesn't need a psak, even though the Rav Paskin, when the Shaila came up, Avada, he's believed to Paskin the Shaila. He just can't, he's not believed to Paskin the Shaila on himself unless he had already come up with that psak before it was relevant to him. Zog to Gemara weiter. Zog to Gemara weiter. Mikol Mokan Kasha. Lamaita, it's a good kasha. It's the derech. It's the derech for women to come. Women should come and serve the women. And he said, "What are you going to have the men serve the women? Rather not." So the same tefillah that there was on the male mayavi was a tefillah on the female mayavis. So ever the Gemara, and this was Chaim Tzvi said yesterday right off the bat, Hacha tirgamu kol kvuda bas melech penima. A woman is the beauty of a woman is her tznius, and even though you might say she should go out and bring women, no, her covered is penima. And the Gemara brings a raya. The Gemara brings a raya. The pasuk says, so you see, what were they trying to do? They were just trying to highlight to Avram what a wonderful wife he had, that she was called Kvuda Bas Melech Pnima. The derech is not for a wife to leave the house. So Chaim Tzvi, who did you stay over from the beautiful word? That what business do they have asking about his wife? They were just trying to bring home a point that she was a Isha Chashuva, and she stuck to the principles of called Kvuda Bas Melech Pnima. Who was it, Chaim Tzvi, remember?
Yeah, Rabbi Avraham Erlanger, the Birkas Avraham. He said it on the word of when the Gemara quotes the Yerushalmi people who would say Motzah or Moitza. That's what.
Why the question? Why are they asking it now by the chasna? Ask it in a week, in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
the parent says we only want to ask it while we know for sure the answer. We're just trying to highlight that answer.
Right.
So this halacha of kol kvuda bas melech pnima, like Rashi says, the derech isha lotus mebaisa, is halacha lemaisa. It's a fascinating halacha, and I'll tell you what the halacha is. The halacha is what happens if you tell a man, you make someone into a shliach, and you said, "Go be mekadosh an isha for me, whoever you want," and then he disappears. We don't see him ever again. So we have halacha chazaka shliach isha shluchusay, and you're married to a woman out there. Because you're married to a woman out there, Zok to Gemara, you're not allowed to marry any other woman. Because for all you know, any other woman that you want to marry is the sister of the woman that he was Mekadosh for you. Because you gave him the authority to be Mekadosh and Isha, so you have a wife out there. So any woman who you want to marry, it might be your sister. And if she doesn't have any sisters, it might be your grandmother. So you're stuck. So they ask on this Gemara, why don't you say, Kol the Parish, Meruba Parish? You go Basar Roiv. Roiv, the woman that I'm marrying, is not also to me because of this phantom woman that I married. So the Gemara answers, Kol Kfuda Bas Melech Pnima. You never say Kol the Parish, Meruba Parish. A woman is not called a Parish. A woman is always a Kavua Kamech Talmechza, because she's always in her home. So since a woman's always in her home, we never look at her as called a parish. It's always Kamech Talmechza. So you see the concept of Kol Kfuda Bas Melech Pnima is used halacha l'maisa to say that you wouldn't go Basarayv when you're marrying a woman. Zok Teilif Gemara Vayter.
See, if I may add, Rabbi Engel on Thursday night brought up this Gemara, and he said David HaMelech is the one who said Kol Kfuda Bas Melech Mina, Kol Kfuda Bas Melech Pnima. He's trying to protect his own lineage. He's the one who came from Yishai. So the Gemara says here, Aye Sara Yishtecha. Right? If you look at the Rosh Tevis of Aye Sara Yishtecha, it's Kois Yeshuais Esa.
Wow.
Right? The Esa, that's what I need. I need that Snua to be able to be matir me into Klal Yisrael.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Wow. Who did he say it over from?
He said it from Haggadah Shel Pesach, I think. It was a whole back and forth about who you paskin like, but this was the upshot of it.
Beautiful. Okay, Zok Gemara. Dorish Rava, my dechsiv. It says, Pitachta l'meiseri, Ona Hashem kani avdecha, ani avdecha ben amasecha. Pitachta l'meiseri, you opened up my shackles. You opened up the ropes that were tying me down. What ropes were tying David down? Amar David l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rebbeinu Shalom, Shnei Maisaros Shahayu Alai, the two ropes that were constraining me, those two ropes, pasachtem, you opened them up. What two ropes were constraining me? Rusa Moyavia, my grandmother, who because of her, my malchus was threatened, because people were saying that I wasn't that my grandmother wasn't allowed to marry into Yiddish, right? And Naaman Hamoinis, Nama was an Amoinis. She was the mother of Rechavam. She was Shlomo's wife, the mother of Rechavam. Again, they needed the same heter of Amoni v'loy Amoinis. Dorish Rava, my dechsiv, Rabbi Sasisa, David HaMelech says, Rabbi Sasisa, Ata Hashem Elokehi, Nifloisecha u'machshaveisecha eleinu. Your niflois and your machshavos eleinu are on us, not on me, are on us. Elai loy nemar, ela eleinu. What do you mean on us? Melamed sho Rechavam Yosy b'chekei shel David. Rechavam the Einikel was sitting on David's lap, and Amar Elai, David told his Einikel, Einikel Rechavam ulai v'leichu nemri. I feel like I'm a ulai v'leichu nemri. These Blukim were said for me and for you, they bailed us out. Dr. Gemara Vayter. And what are the Shtei B'Krois Halalu? The Shtei B'Krois Halalu, I believe, are referring to Amoni, V'loi Amonis. It says, Al Devar Asher Loi, Yotza B'Lechem U'Vayayin. It says, why are they also? It's because they didn't come B'Lechem U'Vayayin. And for that we use a svara to darcha shel ish, not darcha shel isha. And the other reason the Torah gives as to why we can't marry Ma'avi is because Asher Sachar is Bilam ben Ba'or. Again, who rented Bilam ben Ba'or? The men, not the women, which means that the women are mutter. So these two psukim saved us, saved our fortunes. Zok to Gemara Vayter. Dorish Rava, my dechsev, it says in the pasuk, Ozamarti. I said, Hine Bosi b'Megillas Sefer Kosav Alai. I'm coming with the Megillah of the Sefer that was written upon me. Omar David. David said, Ani Amarti Atabasi. I look originally at my life like things happen, not necessarily predestined. Punkt, a tzufal, it occurred, this would happen, and now I got to deal with it. Below Yadati, but I never knew that all of my struggles were already pre-written. Sheva Megillas Sefer Kosovalai. Where do you see that all of David's struggles were written up in the Torah long ago? When Lot was stuck with his two daughters, where it was the origins of Ammon and Moav, it says, the Torah uses the word hanimtzaos when we're discussing the origins of Ammon and Moav. And Haraksiv, Matzasi David Avdi, B'Shem Kachim Mishachtiv, I smeared him with the shemen, I made him into a king, but he used the word matzasi. So the word matzasi used to describe what happened with David is alluding back to the nimtzois that it was already predestined way back then, already that this was going to happen. So the Mefarshim tell us that we think, oh, we go through this Torah, we go through that Torah. Every single thing that we go through, was predestined from the beginning of the world, which was the exact experience that we needed to go through to fulfill our tafkid. So we never have a sorrow, we never have, oh, why did this happen to me? Nothing happened to me. It was already written from Brias to Olam exactly what was going to happen, because this is your part of the puzzle. This is what we need to do. Nothing is tamat sorrow. Everything is actually one of the complex puzzle pieces of which we're playing in Yiddishkeit to bring the tachlis or amiti. Zog to Gemara weiter. Now we're going to get back to Yevamos. Ger Amoni Ksher Lakuna. Bas Ger Amoni Ksher Lakuna. So let's see. Pashup Pshat is an Amoni became a Ger. Who's he going to marry? Can't marry a Bas Yisrael. So he was Megayer with an Amonis. So an Amoni Ger married an Amonis Ger. They had a daughter. That daughter is Kosher Lakuna. She's even allowed to marry a Kohen. Amalei Rabbi Barula. Come on. Exactly according to who is Rabbi Yochanan trying to express this chiddush? Iker Rabbi Yehuda, if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, it can be. Ha'amar bas ger zacher kibas halal zacher. Rabbi Yehuda said the daughter of a ger is like the daughter of a halal. Forget that she's an amoinus. The mere fact that she's the daughter of gerim makes her into a halal, and the halal may not marry a kohen. So Rabbi Yochanan could not have said this halacha according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosy, and if you hold like Rabbi Yosy, then Rabbi Yochanan is not even a chiddush. Pshita, ha'amar af ger should not a giyaris, even a ger who married a giyaris, bitoi kshera l'kahuna. So exactly what did Rabbi Yochanan say, and why is it a chiddush? The chitema, when did maybe Rabbi Yochanan's chiddush is Rabbi Yosy? Are you going to tell me it's pshita because Rabbi Yosy said af ger should not a giyaris, bitoi kshera l'kahuna? No, maybe that's behanach to ruin lavi beklal. Maybe who was Rabbi Yosy talking about? Two Gerda Geyeris who didn't have a prohibition. For instance, an Italian, but not necessarily an Ammonian. Aval Hai, they roy love the but an Ammoni who's not allowed to come to Bakal, maybe loy. Maybe their Rabbi Yosy didn't say that their child could marry a kohen. And comes Rabbi Yochanan to tell you that chiddush. Minole. Zog to Gemara, how did Rabbi Yochanan know this chiddush? How would he know that it should be a problem? Why would he think that just because the parents weren't able to come l'kahal, why would he say from that? Why would that be a reason to argue that the daughter can't marry a kohen? So what do you see from a kohen gadol balmon? Zog Rashi, minale zog Rashi, minatesi hai. Why would you think just because the father couldn't marry a Jewish girl, that's why his daughter should be possible? Why? An almana was not allowed to marry an almana. Kohen Gadol, was not allowed to marry an almana. And since he couldn't marry this woman, therefore his daughter is asur l'kuna. She's a halala. So maybe So too, since this Ammoni could not have married a Bas Yisrael, his daughter should be Pasal Lakuna. So you don't have a raya. Mala Kohen Gadol, she can be also Avera. Do you know why the Kohen Gadol's daughter from an Almana has a Psula of a Halala? Because she was created through an Avera. But an Ammoni ger is allowed to marry an Ammoni's ger. So why would I suggest that the daughter would be Asr? So tomorrow Halal Yachid. Halal, a Halal is not Asr to marry anybody. A Halal can marry anybody, yet the daughter of a Halal is still going to be Asr to a Kohen. So tomorrow Malach Halal should get Yitziros of Avera. The Halal was created through an Avera. He was only created because the Kohen Gadol married an Almana, or the Kohen Hedjit married a Grusha. So Kohen Gadol Yachid. The Kohen Gadol was not Yotze Ba'aver. The Kohen Gadol was pure, yet he still answers his children. The Chazar didn't. Loi roizeh karoizeh, loi roizeh karoizeh. A Halal had Yitzir Ba'aver, but there was no Aver done. A Kohen Gadol Ba'almana is Yitzir Asay B'Ktusha, but he did an Aver. Hatzar Shavush Shabeh. What do they both have similar that makes them passel their children? She'enei B'Rev Kahal. Most families aren't built on these types of situations. On the Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, on a Halal, and Uvite Psula, and his daughter is Pasal Lakuna. Afkan, She'ina B'Rev Kol, so to an Ammoni who marries an Ammonis, Ubita Psula, his daughter would be Pasal for marrying, and that's why, for marrying a Kohen, that's why B'Yoichan had to tell us that she could marry. In fact, you don't have a riot. Mala Tala Shavush Shabahed, Sai Kohen Gadol Ba'almana, Sai Chalala, Shekin Yesh Point Taraver. There's an Avera here. A Chalala came from an Avera. A Kohen Gadol Ba'almana is doing an Avera. But an Ammoni marrying an Ammonis, there's no Avera done at all. Zok to Gemara, Dilma, Ba'ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael Kamrit. Maybe Rabbi Yechon is saying a greater Chiddush. He's not saying an Ammoni who married an Ammonis, it's Bitek Sher Lakuna. That's Pashut. He's saying even an Ammoni who married a Bas Yisrael, and there's an issue here of Lo Yaveh Ammoni B'Kal Hashem. Nevertheless, the daughter born from this illegal marriage will be kosher lakuna. Afagav to be also ba'aveir, even though the Ammoni was not allowed to marry the Bas Yisrael, Bita Ksher, his daughter will be kosher lakuna. Amalayin, he says, you know what? You're right. That is in fact what Rabbi Yochanan said. The Chi'at Rabban Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because when Rabban came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Bas Ger Ammoni, the daughter of a Ger Ammoni, Ubas Mitzri Sheni, and the daughter of a Mitzri of the second generation, and we know Dor Shlishi Yaveh Lebekal, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Ksher, Rabbi Yochanan holds that they're kosher lakuna, of Rish Lakish Amar Psula, and Rish Lakish holds their Psula. Rish Lakish Amar Psula, why did Rish Lakish say that these girls may not marry Kohanim? The Aleph law, Kohen Gadol Ba'almana. He learned it from Kohen Gadol Ba'almana. Like we said, that there was an Isser there, and since there was an Isser there, the child is Pasal Lakuna. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Ksheira, Rabbi Yochanan says Ksheira, and we're going to turn over on top of base. 1 second. The Tani, Rabbi Zakai, Kamei Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Zakai learned in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Says Kiyim B'Sula Me'amav Yikach Isha. There's a mitzvah assay for a Kohen Gadol to marry a B'Sula and not to marry an Almana. Lahavi Yiyaris Mikana from her base, she Ksher L'Kahuna. This teaches us that a Giyaris from her base is kosher L'Kahuna. What does that mean, a Giyaris from her base? Dr. Rashi, Giyaris Mikana, Mimechayna, from her base. Kloimar, Shavia, V'ima Mi'amechad. You learn from here that if both nationalities of both parents are from the same Am, and V'nod B'Kedusha, and when this child was born, her parents were already from. So therefore, she was Nod B'Kedusha, Dr. B'Yochanan, that would be mutter to a Kohen Gadol. Lafuke Ger Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael. This would exclude a Ger Ammoni who married a Bas Yisrael, which was also the Lav Michanahi. That wasn't from her base, because it's mixed nationality. It's the nationality of an Ammoni with a Bas Yisrael. Hoil will be also by Averai, Bute Psula, his daughter will be Pasal Lakuna. So Rabbi Zakkai told Rabbi Yochanan that Davka an Amoini ger who married an Amoini's ger, which was a completely mutter dika union, their child, their daughter is mutter l'kahuna. But Rabbi Yochanan didn't like what Rabbi Zakkai said. But Rabbi Yochanan said, "Ani shoyna amov mei amov." It says in the pasuk, "Ki in besula mei amov yikachisha," not besula amov, and that's marbe lahavi besula haba mi beis amamin. Even if it's a besula who comes from two nationalities, meaning an Amoini you married to Yisrael, even there I hold that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to marry her. The Yat Amrit and you, Rabbi Zakkai, are telling me Yorish Mekana Besuloi. So my Shnei Amim, what does Shnei Amim mean? I've already given it up. I've already explained it. Ilema Amoini Shenos Amoinis. If it's an Amoini who married an Amoinis, Umayim Shnei Amim. And how do you want to describe Shnei Amim? They're both from the same nation. You'll say the reason why they're like two separate nations is because they have two different halach. Halachically, they're two separate nations. The Zecharim Asurim, the father of the Ammoni is also the Klal Yisrael, so he's a one nation. When the Kevois, but Ammonis, who's a female, Mutare, since she's mutter to marry into Klal Yisrael, that's why it's called two Amamin. But Hainu Giyoris Michano, isn't that exactly what Rabbi Zakkai quoted? Lahavi Giyoris Michano, which Rabbi Yochanan disagreed with. Ella, which case is Rabbi Yochanan coming to add that even this case, the daughters are allowed to marry a Kohen, even by Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael, even if an Ammoni married a Bas Yisrael, which was an Isser Dekazivot, nevertheless, a daughter born from there, according to Rabbi Yochanan, is going to be kosher. The Ika de Amri, and there are those who learn a different pshat. Zok to Gemara, the Ika de Amri, Amr Lei, Rabbi Yochanan responded to Rabbi Zakkai as follows: Ani shayna amov me amov lahavi besula haba mishnei amamin. To include a besula came from mishnei amamin, ume am sheyesh by mishnei amamin, and from a nation that has two amamin. So here Rabbi Yochanan is much more explicit that I'm clearly referring to an Ammoni who married a Yisrael and an Ammoni who married an Ammoni. V'yat amrit ki yoris michana v'suloi, and you, Rabbi Zakkai, want to say that the only child that's mutter to marry kahuna is if it's the Ammoni ger who married an Ammoni's yoris? No, even an Ammoni ger who married a Bas Yisrael, even there her children will be kosher l'chahuna. Let me see where I'm up to. I got lost over here. V'adam geirus b'chana v'suloi, ma yishnei amamin, ilay ma'amoni shnos amonis, u'ma mishnei amamin, the Zecharim Asurim, the Kevis V'taris, hanu geirus b'chana, ela b'amoni shnos Bas Yisrael. Av hikadami amar lei, ani shoyna amav me'amav, lavi b'sula abba mishnei amamin, u'me am sheyesh b'shnei amamin. So it includes both an Ammoni you married Ammonis and an Ammoni you married Bas Yisrael. V'yat amrit, and you're arguing and you're saying geirus b'chana v'suloi. So these are the two lashonis of what Rabbi Yochanan said. But either way, it's clear from here that Rabbi Yochanan holds that an Ammoni ger who married a Bas Yisrael illegally and they had a daughter, that daughter, in fact, is allowed to marry a Kohen. According to this lesson, Bas Mitri Sheni, Tikshera L'Kahuna, a Bas Mitri Sheni, that's kosher L'Kahuna, Minole. How does he know that that will be Mutter L'Kahuna? Zadrashi L'Hai Lishna. The Ketani Behedya, in the Lashon where it says Beferish, Shloi Marbi Elabas Ammoni, the Ketani Me'am Sheyesh B'Shnei Amamin, if Rabbi Yochanan is B'davka talking only about an Ammoni, how do you know that Rabbi Yochanan holds that a Bas Mitri Sheni, Shenasa Yisraelis, Ubi Asai Ba'avera, a second generation Mitri, who married a Yisraelis and he wasn't allowed to marry, how do you know, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that his daughter is going to be kosher l'kahuna? Because on Omer Aleph, we said he held that they were kosher l'kahuna. Zok to Gemara, v'chitem, if you want to say the Aleph me'amoni shenasa Bas Yisrael, we know it. If an Ammoni you married a Bas Yisrael, it was an Isser Dekaziva, yet Rabbi Yochanan holds that the daughter is mutter l'kahuna. So why should it be any different if a Mitri married a Bas Yisrael it was an illegal zivug, so his daughter should also be mutter Israel. And the Kahuna. So no, Mala Moini Shenata Bat Yisrael Shekei Nekevus Mutaris. Amoini Shenata Bat Yisrael. The whole parish of Amoini is less chomer than Mitzrayim. You know why? Because by Amoini women aren't included in the prohibition, but a Mitzri is much more chomer. So that's not a kasha, because Mitzri Sheni Shenata Mitzri Shniya Yechiach. A Mitzri Sheni Shenata Mitzri Sheni Shniya. Their daughter is for sure allowed to marry because the third generation is mutter lovay bakal. So therefore, and they're more chomer because they're both usher, both the man and the woman. Dr. Gemara, Mal Mitri Sheni, Shenat Mitri Shniya, Shekein Ein Biyaseh Ba'Aveira. That union was not an Aveira. A Mitri Sheni was allowed to marry a Mitri Shniya. Let's see Rashi, Mitri Sheni, Shenat Mitri Shniya Yichiach, Shabita Ksheira, the daughter of such a union, which is the third generation, will be Mutter Lakuna. Sheresh Lishati, she's already the third generation. Even though there's a tzat chomer, like we said, even females are also by mitzvim, kiddush chomer. Nevertheless, that third generation is allowed to marry kuno. Afani Aviyazu, I also should include a mitzri who married a Yisrael, hoyel v'arei shlishis ksher lakuna, since she is already the third generation. So that was not a biyasura. The Gemara Amoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael Yechiach, and Amoni who married a Bas Yisrael, who Rabbi Yochanan said that daughter is mutter lakuna because that was biyasur ba'avera b'chazar adin loy rezek harayizeh. Amoni who married a Bas Yisrael is a biyasura, and nevertheless, the child is mutter lakuna. You're going to say that an Amoni is not so chomer because an Amoni would be mutter. Well, even by a mitzri sheni, it's not a mitzri. So not from Mitrishiniya, the child would also be mutter lakuna, and there both the man and the female are also. Yet you still see it's mutter lakuna. So between these two things, Mitri Sheni and not from Mitrishniya, and then the Moinish and not Bas Yisrael, both those daughters are kosher lakuna. So too a Mitri Sheni married a Bas Yisrael, his daughter will also be mutter lakuna. Rabbi Yosef, now I finally understand. This finally clicks in my mind. What was once quoted in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. It was a cryptic message, and I never understood what it meant. And now I know what it meant. He said, Amav me Amov. He said, Amav me Amov. It's this drasha. It says, came to me Amov. And I never knew what the drasha was. And now I know he was referring to Rabbi Yochanan's halacha, that even in Amoni, Shenasa, Bas Yisrael, the daughter is mutter lakun. This is what we learned. Amoni, Isha Amonis, a woman who's an Amonis, Ksheira. She's kosher to marry a Yisrael. But if a woman who's an Amonis marries an Amoni and has a child, possible, because this child is also called an Amoni. But Ubita my Amoni, but if a woman who's an Amonis marries an Amoni and have a daughter, Ksheira will be kosher. Because once again, she's the same Amonis as her mother, who is also mutter to marry Yisrael. We're talking about an Amoni and an Amonis who got married, who became nisgayer, and they had a child. That child, if it's a daughter, is mutter. Avobita me Amoni psula. But a bita me Amoni, if his daughter is from an Amoni, she will be puzzled. So Zok to Gemara, what happened? Omar lay, so he told him, I believe, who was speaking to? Shmuel Bar Yehuda said this, I think, in front of Rabbi Yochanan. He said, "Puk Tani Levra, I don't like this brisa." And Rashi says, "Why did the Maidika Amar Isha Amonis Ksher LaKahal? That you said on the Isha Amonis Ksher LaKahal Shaper Kamer. You're right. The Amoni V'Lei Amonis Uvinam Amoni Pasuk LaKahal. The Amoni." So Zok the Gemara, my Amrit, that you said Isha Amonis Ksher. I agree with that. Amoni V'Lei Amonis. V'nam Amoni Pasuk. Once again, the Amoni. Uvita me Amoni Ksher. And when it says her daughter from an Amoni's kosher, Lamai, what exactly is it talking about? If we're talking about that she's allowed to marry someone from Klal Yisrael, That's bullshit. Hashta imak shera himi boy. If the mother herself is mutter the amonis, because we say amoni v'lo amonis, surely she should also be mutter bakal. El lekahuna, the chiddush must be that she's also mutter lekahuna. B'medabar mamurim, where do we say she's mutter lekahuna? B'amoni v'amoni shenisgairu. That's only if her parents were Jewish. Avobita ma'amoni psula. But abita ma'amoni is psula. What exactly does this mean? Who is psula lekahuna? My bita ma'amoni, who we're saying is psula lekahuna. Ilema amoni shenos amonis. If it's an amoni you marry the amonis, hainu the giyaris michana. That's a giyaris from her base, which we said already is allowed to marry the kohen. Ella means amoni shenos abas Yisrael. It's an amoni who illegally married a bas Yisrael, and it must be that that's also mutter, and therefore amalei puk tani lebra. That's why he said puk tani lebra, which because what did he quote? He quoted, "I will beat my money psula," and your Rebbe knows no, even beat my money, where a Yisrael is married in the money illegally, even there the child will be mutter to marry a kohen.
Yes, I don't follow. Yes, I don't follow. 1 second. Amoni is also.
And the money is also to marry a Jewish girl.
In what state? As a ger or as an amoni? What's he filling out on his form? Are you an amoni?
Well, even if he was already in the Megayer, he is still not allowed to marry a Jewish girl.
But why are you mekabel him as a ger?
Because you're allowed to be mekabel him as a ger. He's allowed to become a ger.
Who's he supposed to marry? As
A
if they don't have
giyaris.
enough of a shidduch crisis.
A giyaris, the same person who a psula daka would marry.
You can marry any giyaris. Lavdafkin amoinis.
That's right. Just like in our shul, we have a ger, and who are being mishadach with a giyaris.
But the Geiris is also is also Bekal Hashem.
Yeah. So
No, a kal gerim like your kal. So a giyaris is allowed to marry. A giyaris is allowed to marry an amoni. So if an amoni wants to become Jewish, he could become Jewish, no problem. Who will he marry? He'll marry a convert.
as opposed to a Knani who wants to become Jewish, who would he allow to be married? He can
Anybody.
marry.
He can marry the Shiva's daughter.
So in a certain sense, a ger when he's in his geyer does not have the same kedusha as the rest of the Bnei Yisrael.
It's lo ikra kal. That's right. Kahal gerim lo yikri kal. When he says lo yavi bekal Hashem, mamzer lo yavi bekal Hashem, kal gerim lo yikri kal. And a mamzer, what if a guy's a mamzer? Who does he marry? He has to marry a geiris.
Any Gioris. So any Gioris for sure has a subcategory.
What do you mean by
Not
a
like
subcategory?
Ger. No, a Ger, you said, can marry Rosh Hashiva's daughter. A Gioris can't marry a Kohen Gadol's daughter.
A geiris can't marry a kohen gadol's daughter.
I'm sorry, a Kohen Gadol. A Kohen Gadol.
That's because she's a zayna. Not because she's a geiris. The fact that she's a convert does not prohibit him from marrying her. The reason why he can't marry because she's a zayna. And that's why we learned if she becomes a convert when she's less than 3 years old, she could marry a kohen gadol.
Okay.
So that's Rabbi Yochanan's chiddush. Rabbi Yochanan's chiddush is, even though the marriage was illegal, the father, the Amoni the Ger, was not allowed to marry this Bas Yisrael. Nevertheless, his daughter born from a zivug of Isser is not also l'kahuna. She's mutter l'kahuna. And she's not an Amoni. She's an Amonis. Okay, I guess we should stop here because it's 7 o'clock. I got plenty of time, but it's 7 o'clock. So we will have to stop here. Let me just see how much we have left to the bottom of the Amid. Oh, we have a fair amount, but it's not difficult tomorrow. So we'll be fine. Okay, Gavaldik, have a wonderful day. Mitchell, we'll see you tomorrow. I hope to be back in Shir in person tomorrow, but if I'm delayed, I'll log in and we'll do it again remotely.
Okay, just remember that doesn't work in Canada.
Correct. Okay, thank you so much. All the best. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
What doesn't work in
My fight device I gave.
Yeah.
Imagine you're opening a shear for YY.
Haha.